Welcome to another episode of the Cypher Report, where we give you the tools, information, and analysis you need to decrypt the world. So what was expected from President Joe Biden's third State of the Union speech? Per The Atlantic, conventional wisdom held that Biden had little to gain, but much to lose if he seemed lost, old, or incoherent. You know, the fact that he's kind of old. But Biden delivered an energetic and pugnacious speech, one of the strongest of his career. Before we jump in, be sure to hit that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. Let's go ahead and get into it. It is well known that the State of the Union delivered in the third year of a president's first term marks the beginning of their re-election campaign, and Biden's speech was no different. But what was different was the circumstances of the time. We have one presidential candidate in their third year of his first term, and we have a presumptive Republican nominee who has already served a first term. That presumptive nominee has cast a long shadow over the Republican Party and has had extreme amount of influence that no former president has had in my lifetime. Biden referred to his predecessor throughout his speech, drawing sharp contrast between his vision of America and that of Donald Trump. We're going to go over now to various segments of the State of the Union to talk about exactly just what that was. Our first segment that we're going to go over from the State of the Union is where Biden began with talk about Ukraine and comparing himself to FDR. Biden often likes to compare himself to FDR as a seminal figure, is a transitional figure from one kind of idea of what a president should do to another. And this is no different. Let's go ahead and start with it now.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans, in January 1941, Franklin Roosevelt came to this chamber to speak to the nation, and he said, "I address you at a moment unprecedented in the history of the Union. Hitler was on the march. War was raging in Europe. President Roosevelt's purpose was to wake up Congress and alert the American people that this was no ordinary time. Freedom and democracy were under assault in the world. Tonight, I come to this same chamber to address the nation. Now, it's we who face an unprecedented moment in the history of the Union. And yes, my purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today."
So he is comparing what Trump's position is to what was happening during the Civil War, but also talking about how Putin is a threat to democracy abroad.
What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas at the very same time. Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond.
This is very important for Biden to do because there is a large segment of the American population that is kind of tired of how we are supporting pretty much every country across the entire globe with arms and military power and money in order to shore up democracy. Now, the reason that he's bringing this up here is because we all understand, well, people that watch this program anyways, understand that Putin does represent somewhat of an existential threat to the security of Europe, which will eventually translate to a lack of security for the United States as well. If Putin does succeed in Ukraine, as in take over all of Ukraine, there's no reason to assume that Putin will not also have his eye on taking over all of Georgia, possibly Belarus, Moldova, and other former Soviet bloc countries on the way to Poland, because that's what Putin has always dreamed of recreating the USSR in his own image. Let's go back over now to Biden to listen to a little bit more of him point this out himself.
Ukraine can stop Putin.
True.
Ukraine can stop Putin if we stand with Ukraine and provide the weapons that needs to defend itself. That is all. That is all Ukraine is asking. They're not asking for American soldiers.
There you have it.
In fact, there are no American soldiers at war in Ukraine, and I'm determined to keep it that way.
And it is important to understand that if Ukraine does not succeed, the United States will end up having to deploy troops to Western Europe again in order to prevent Putin from making gains on other territory.
But now, assistance to Ukraine is being blocked by those who want to walk away from our world leadership. It wasn't long ago when a Republican president named Ronald Reagan thundered, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Now,
even Mike Johnson here had to noddingly approve of this because he understands that what Biden is saying here is absolutely correct. And putting it on like Reagan and Republicans is also what is actually going on here. But Johnson is a political animal. He is basically the avatar of the Republican Party, just only second to Trump at this point. And so he's going to do Trump's bidding, and he's going to do what the base tells him to do. And that is to disapprove of everything Biden does, even if it is other things Republicans want, because it may help Trump win, which we'll get at later on in Biden's speech. Let's let him continue, though.
Now my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, quote, "Do whatever the hell you want."
Oof.
That's a quote.
Republicans are booing on that, and that's what he said.
Bowing down to a Russian leader. I think it's outrageous, it's dangerous, and it's unacceptable.
It's un-American, what it is. But I think that we've let this part go on long enough and made the case that Biden is trying to make here. If we went on the entire one here, it would go on for about 5 minutes. And I don't think there's a need to do that. I think y'all understand what is going on here. Let's go on now to another segment from the speech that we thought is very important to go over. One of the things the Republicans have done lately is going after family planning, not just with a woman's right to choose, but also with IVF. And we saw that happen in Alabama recently. And Biden brings that up in his speech, which is also a very important thing to talk about because it shows where Republicans actually are and is one of the main driving factors for getting Democrats out to vote. Let's go ahead and get over to that part of the speech now.
Children and grandchildren will read about this day and what we do. History is watching another assault on freedom. Joining us tonight is Latoya Beasley, a social worker from Birmingham, Alabama. 14 months ago, she and her husband welcomed a baby girl thanks to the miracle of IVF. She scheduled treatments to have that second child, but the Alabama Supreme Court shut down IVF treatments across the state, unleashed by a Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. She was told her dream would have to wait. What her family had got through should never have happened. Unless Congress acts, it could happen again. So tonight, let's stand up for families like hers. To my friends across the aisle, don't keep this waiting any longer.
One thing to note here, though, is that the idea or the reason that Republicans are going after IVF is because they have staunchly stated that life begins at conception. And if that has been your belief for decades, if not, 100 plus years or so, it makes sense that they would also go after IVF and make it to where you can't destroy any of the embryos therein because, well, they're concepted, right? They are quote unquote life in that kind of vein. It's utter nonsense. They're not viable until they're implanted. They're not viable while they're frozen. It's kind of really stupid for them to try to say that they're going to say they're going to protect IVF, but then make it to where if something were to happen, say a power outage, or if they ran out of space, that they have to destroy some of those embryos, that is going to constitute murder, which is exactly what's happening with the Alabama ruling. And that is why a lot of fertility treatments in Alabama and soon to probably to be other Republican states without a law from Congress would also have this happen. And it's just utter nonsense. Again, Republicans do not want anybody to basically have any sort of family planning outside of probably the control of the man inside a relationship, whether that be IVF, abortion, morning after pill, birth control, etc. They don't want it to happen. They want to control how you plan your family. Let's listen to some of the more of the speech, though, here.
Guarantee the right to AVF. Guarantee it nationwide.
Stephen Johnson's like, okay.
Like most Americans, I believe Roe v. Wade got it right. I thank Vice President Harris for being an incredible leader defending reproductive freedom and so much more. Thank you. My predecessor came to office determined to see Roe v. Wade overturned. He's the reason it was overturned, and he brags about it.
Absolutely true.
Look at the chaos that has resulted. Joining us tonight is Kate Cox, the wife and mother from Dallas. She's become pregnant again and had a fetus of a fatal condition. Her doctor told Kate that her own life and her ability to have children in the future were at risk if she didn't act. Because Texas law banned her ability to act, Kate and her husband had to leave the state to get what she needed. What her family got through should have never happened as well, but it's happening in too many others. There are state laws banning the freedom to choose, criminalizing doctors, forcing survivors of rape and incest to leave their states to get the treatment they need.
Absolutely true. Let's go ahead and pause it here. So what we're seeing here is that when Roe v. Wade was overturned, as we've discussed on this program multiple times, is that Republican states have made it an issue that doctors themselves would be held criminally liable if a woman were to get an abortion. But not just doctors. Anybody in the case of Texas, anybody that would help a woman to seek abortion could also be fined at $10,000 and serve prison time. And the reason why Katie Cox here had to leave the state of Texas in order to get the abortion care that she needed, and yes, she needed it, even if you're against abortion, it was a life-saving procedure, is because Texas would have made it illegal for the doctor to help her. And the doctors in question were advised under legal authority by the hospitals that she was seeing her doctor at that they could not carry it out unless her life was imminently in danger. In other words, on the verge of death. Even though we knew and she knew and the doctors knew that this fetus was not viable and that it would risk her life if it were to allow to continue, she still had to get the abortion out of state. And that is because of laws that Republicans have passed here. But there's more that we have to bring up here with the State of the Union address. So let's now go over to another clip from the State of the Union about, well, what everybody is talking about and focused on across the country, and that is immigration.
In November, my team began serious negotiation with a bipartisan group of senators. The result was a bipartisan bill with the toughest set of border security reforms we've ever seen.
Absolutely true. Even though Republicans are booing at this, it's absolutely true.
Oh, you don't like that bill, huh? That conservatives got together and said it was a good bill? I'll be darned. That's amazing.
Oh.
That bipartisan...
That look on Biden's face there. Let's let that replay. Right there. Right there, that look is like, oh, so you actually care about the border, do you? I don't believe you. That's amazing, right? That's what that face looks. That's what that is right there. Let's go ahead and let it continue, though.
Darn, that's amazing. That bipartisan bill would hire 1,500 more security agents and officers, 100 more immigration judges to help tackle the backlog.
All of this is very much needed.
4,300 more asylum officers, and new policies so they can resolve cases in 6 months instead of 6 years now.
He's the author of the bill, and he just whispered, it's true. Look at that again.
What do you get?
Let's look at that again.
6 months instead of 6 years now.
True. Yep. So that is Senator Lankford, and he is the architect of the bill. He was the lead point person from the Republican side to get the Senate bill passed, to get Republicans and Democrats on board from the Republican side. And he has been taken to task by his own party over the willingness to compromise with Democrats in a way that would have given Republicans a win. As we've said on this program in interviews and debates with people such as Nate Dowling, and as well as on shows like Wick, this is one of the most conservative bills to ever come out of the Senate in regards to immigration. If you are a open borders type of leftist, or even a leftist that is more along the lines of, hey, we need more people to come in, that should be an easier process kind of person, even if that's you, this bill is crap to you. And it should have been a win for Republicans. Yet they didn't allow it because Johnson kowtowed to Trump. But there's more. Let's let him continue.
What are you against? 100 more high-tech drug detection machines to significantly increase the ability to screen and stop vehicles smuggling fentanyl into America.
Yeah, they care about fentanyl. One pill kills, right? But did they pass this bill? No.
And bring order to the border. It will also give me and any new president new emergency authority to temporarily shut down the border when the number of migrants at the border is overwhelming.
So we're going to pause it here and bring it up close here. So this is true to an extent. It's not like he's lying or anything like that. It's when they say to shut down the border, what they mean is, legally speaking, both from an international treaties perspective as well as just the U.S. Constitution, is that you can't just shut the border down entirely. That would impact way too many people's rights and freedoms, citizens, and human rights and that sort of thing as well. What it does mean, though, is that anybody that tries to cross the border from a non-legal point of entry would be instantly turned away, legally instantly turned away, by Customs and Border Patrol agents that would see them. So if a person is seeking asylum and they come to the border through like Eagle Pass or some other non-legal border crossing, and the amount of border crossings or amount of people that the Customs and Border Patrol had found or encountered or processed or tried to process exceeded 5,000, then it would allow the president to be like, no more. We're shutting it down. You're not allowed to come in here. Go to a legal point of entry and do it there, which would make the flows of migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, or illegal entries more manageable for the federal government and for state governments. And it would make the actual crisis, which is what we have is the border issue. It would make the actual crisis more manageable and probably not exist, to be honest. And that's mostly why they don't want to do it. Well, let's go ahead and go back to this part of the speech, which we believe is very important, to talk a little bit more about the matter at hand.
The Border Patrol Union has endorsed this bill. The Federal Chamber of Commerce is, yeah. You're saying low. Look at the facts. I know.
Look at the facts. True.
I know you know how to read.
Do they? I'm not so sure.
I believe that given the opportunity for a majority in the House and Senate would endorse the bill as well, a majority right now. But unfortunately, politics has derailed this bill so far. I'm told my predecessor called members of Congress in the Senate to demand.
He's calling Johnson out right now, which is why Johnson's
he feels political win. He viewed it as would be a political win for me and a political loser for him. It's not about him. It's not about me. I'd be a winner. Not really. All
right, so here's the infamous part of the speech.
Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of the thousands of people being killed by illegals?
So this was one of the things, and I'm going to pull it back. This is one of the things that a lot of lefties and progressives gave Biden crap over. Rightfully so. He used inappropriate language to describe what happened. An illegal immigrant is not somebody that is not a term that is used among liberals, lefties, progressives, etc. anymore because it makes it sound like it's a dehumanizing language, and it is dehumanizing. But if we listen to that again here in a moment, you'll hear what the actual point was that he was making. And that was basically calling Marjorie Taylor Greene a racist piece of shit. Let's listen back to that, shall we?
Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of the thousands of people being killed by illegals?
But how many thousands of people are being killed by legals? It's not about where the person comes from. It's about the crime the individual committed. And Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Republican Party want to label every single migrant, every single legal entry into the country, every single asylum seeker as dangerous. And that's been Trump's MO since he ran for president in 2015, starting in 2015. Even before then, he was saying this stuff. It's where the Republican Party has been for mostly my entire life, if we're honest. Ross Perot didn't run as a Republican, ran as an independent, but some of the stuff that is in the Republican Party right now started there, started in the 80s. Center for Immigration Studies, Numbers USA, and other think tanks started by a racist eugenist piece of shit have infiltrated and influenced the Republican Party to be this xenophobic nonsense that they represent. And that it can't be any clearer than what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing here, resting on the murder of an innocent person and trying to blame every single immigrant for that murder. So we can complain. We lefties can complain about the language being used. Rightfully so. But the fact of the matter is that Biden actually said the right thing in the wrong way. And that's what we needed to point out here with that clip. There's a little bit more that we have to cover here. So let's go ahead and get over into some additional clips here before we talk about the Republican response to this, which is just hilariously bad. And you know what? We'll just save it. Now, earlier in the Biden speech, he referenced creating a more affordable housing market through tax incentives and the like. And we're wanting to focus in on this because on this program, we've talked about how zoning, tax credits, and a whole slew of other things has made housing unaffordable for everyday Americans. And what Biden proposes here seems to be one of the ways in which this could be addressed. Not perfect, but it's getting there. Let's go ahead and watch.
And benefit millions of lives all across America. I know the cost of housing is so important to you. If inflation keeps coming down, mortgage rates will come down as well, and the Fed acknowledges that. But I'm not waiting. I want to provide an annual tax credit that will give Americans $400 a month for the next 2 years as mortgage rates come down, to put toward their mortgages when they buy their first home or trade up for a little more space.
Sounds pretty good to me.
For 2 years.
For 2 years, that's not too bad.
And my administration is also eliminating title insurance on federally backed mortgages.
Oh, that's good.
When you refinance your home, you can save $1,000 or more as a consequence. For millions of renters,
not bad.
We're cracking down on big landlords who use who break antitrust laws by price fixing and driving up rents. We've cut red tape so builders can get federally financing, which is already helping build.
This is probably the most important thing.
1.7 million new housing units.
Hold on. So this is probably the most important thing right here, is what Biden's saying right now with getting more housing on the market. What?
Who break antitrust laws by price fixing and driving up rents. We've cut red tape so builders can get federally financing, which is already helping build a record 1.7 million new housing units nationwide.
Great.
Now pass and build and renovate 2 million affordable homes and bring those rents down.
Good. All right, so we're going to cut it there. Now, the reason why all these things are important, but not enough, is because of the fact that it doesn't actually tackle the most pressing issue when it comes to housing affordability. And that is the fact that home builders are building what is known as starter homes. Most homes that are built are 1,1700 square feet or more. And also the fact that it's not tackling zoning. But it can't tackle zoning, because zoning is something that can only be tackled on the state level. And we've seen some more progressive cities do things that are good in terms of housing reform or land reform, zoning reform. We saw it in Seattle, Austin, and California, various Californian cities, where they've passed the ability for people that own a home to build AUDs or accessory dwelling units, ADUs rather. And those don't necessarily fix the issue entirely. There's going to be a lot of people that are like, well, I have a 2,000 square foot and a big backyard, so I'll build a thing I can rent out on Airbnb and make some extra money, which is what a lot of the people are probably doing. But what that also does, though, it reduces the amount of land needed in order to put up any housing structure, which means that there can be more housing built in general, whether it be condos, apartments, or homes, and also tackling single family home zoning issues, where you have a community of like 500 plus single family units in a neighborhood, 1,000, 2,000 plus subdivisions, family home units, without any apartments, without anything else that's built in the area, which is why you have suburban sprawl happening and all that stuff. In order to actually tackle the affordability crisis, getting more homes on the market, as well as increasing not just density, but walkable cities, and that, like, you have to tackle those things. That's not something the president can do. The president can do is the things that he stated here, making it cheaper to the consumer to get a federal backed loan, making it to where you can get a little bit of help every month or yearly on your taxes on your first pot home. Stuff like that, which a lot of states do themselves. States have things like homesteading exemptions, where they exempt part of the value of the home from the taxes because you need a place to live in order to, live properly. And so if you're a single, if you own one home and that's where your primary residence is, then you get some additional tax relief on that as well. But that pretty much covers all the things that we wanted to cover when it comes to the State of the Union. Everybody else would cover most of the other stuff that is here, including the competing visions for America that Biden represents versus Trump. We don't want to get into that too much, but we will move on now to the rebuttal to the State of the Union. It was, the least that we could say, a bit unhinged. Actually, as we are already over 20 minutes on this episode, we will save Katie Britt's response to the State of the Union for another episode. We're also still currently working on our second part to her report that focuses mostly on the media's response to that report. And the reason why it's delayed is because the media has decided to pivot and also try to kind of fight back against the initial narrative after more information about her report came to light. So we are going to be posting that episode in the next week or so, if not sooner. So if you want to stay up to date with our latest offerings, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Cypher Report, for our latest information. And be sure to check out our next episode in order to get the tools, information, and analysis you need to decrypt the world.